This is CBC Vancouver News.
It could be a game changer for realtors.
It's going to revolutionize the practice of real estate agency.
The consequence of our lawsuit will mean more money in the pocket of home sellers.
How a U.S. lawsuit over real estate commissions could affect Canadian home buyers and sellers. Plus, strong reaction to a new security law in Hong Kong.
This is the darkest age of Hong Kong I've ever seen.
Advocates in BC are slamming it as an affront to human rights and freedom. Also, how happy are you?
I know a lot of people my age have been suffering from anxiety and depression.
Things like the pandemic, not being able to see your friends.
Our young seem to be doing worse than our elders.
If you're a young person, chances are you're not as happy as your parents. A new report reveals why. Hi, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. A lawsuit settlement in the United States is getting attention from BC real estate experts. It comes after a group representing U.S. realtors agreed to pay out millions of dollars, accused of artificially inflating real estate commissions. And they agreed to change in practice that should mean cost savings for home sellers. And as Yasmin Vanea reports, a similar lawsuit is now playing out in Canadian courts.
It's going to revolutionize the practice of real estate agency.
Vancouver real estate expert Tom Davidoff has high hopes for BC after a major U.S. settlement. The National Association of Realtors has agreed to pay $418 million and eliminate the standard 6% sales commission. The settlement still needs court approval.
The hope here is that sellers will wind up paying less in commissions when they sell their homes, which may make them more eager to sell their houses.
And he says that's also a win for buyers. So here's how it worked in the U.S. If you want to sell your home, you probably want to get an agent, and that selling agent makes a deal with the buyer's agent. It's a commission, and it's split two ways between the two agents at roughly 6%. That adds a lot of money for the seller, which can lead to increased housing prices for buyers. Now the Realtors Group in the U.S. has agreed to stop this practice, and there's hope for would-be buyers and sellers in Canada that it might end here too.
The argument is that that is not fair, doing it that way, and by doing it that way, it falsely inflates the amount that the seller will actually be required to pay in the end.
In this country, the same commission rule exists, but percentages vary. In BC, it's 7% on the first $100,000 and 3% on the balance. So now a similar battle is set to unfold here in Canada. The Canadian Real Estate Association and dozens of local brokerages are facing a class action lawsuit. It alleges a conspiracy between brokerages to boost commissions, which the CREA denies. The settlement in the U.S. could strengthen the Canadian case, says the firm behind it.
We think that the consequence of our lawsuit will mean more money in the pocket of home sellers, and it'll reduce the cost we expect residential real estate across the country.
None of the allegations in the lawsuit have been proven in court, and the suit is still waiting to be certified as a class proceeding. Yasmin Vanea, CBC News, Vancouver.
An alarming scene in downtown Vancouver today with reports of a man chasing people with a knife. Police responded to what they called a serious assault on Smith and Beatty shortly before noon. 2 people received first aid from paramedics at the scene. The stab wounds were non-life-threatening. A 46-year-old suspect was arrested nearby.
It's quite shocking. I mean, for most days downtown, all sorts of things happen, but this is the first time that I've experienced something like this.
Cambie Street was closed to traffic in both directions for several hours. Investigators are asking for anyone with more information to contact them. A provincial court judge has acquitted a Colona man for going on an angry tirade against a security guard during the pandemic.
Go back to your country. You're not a Canadian. You're not a Canadian.
A local reporter caught this on video in 2021. Bruce Ordza can be seen yelling at a South Asian security guard outside a vaccine clinic. He was charged with disturbing the peace. The case was widely condemned, with then Premier John Horgan calling it vile, racist behavior. This week, a judge said that although Ordzic's actions were offensive, insulting, and obscene, they did not meet the legal definition of disturbing the peace. Ordzic is a well-known member of the Colona Freedom Rally movement, which held weekly protests decrying public health orders and COVID vaccines. Advocates in BC and abroad are decrying a new so-called security law in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong government says it will protect the territory, but as our Liam Britton is finding out, critics say it's an affront to human rights and freedom.
Edmund Wan, better known as Giggs, spent about a year in prison in Hong Kong on charges of sedition and money laundering for his support of Hong Kong exiles. But under new rules, it could have been much longer.
I'm damn sure that I will be put in prison for at least 2 to 3 years.
He's a refugee in Canada now, living in the Lower Mainland. And like many in the exile community, he's decrying Article 23, which he says has Hong Kongers afraid to speak out.
This is the darkest age of Hong Kong I've ever seen.
The Article 23 national security law passed in Hong Kong's legislature unanimously after being unveiled less than 2 weeks ago. The territory's chief executive, John Lee, appealed for it to be passed at full speed, and starting Saturday, it will be in force, threatening harsh new penalties to quash opposition to the territory's government, including tougher punishments for breaking the so-called sedition law, which critics say is a tool used to crack down on voices for democracy. They now face up to 7 years in prison for seditious acts and words, up from 2. Failing to report treason by others could lead to 14 years in prison. Giggs says no one is sure what will define those offenses.
Only the Hong Kong government, under the Chinese Communist Party, has the only interpretation on what is treason, what is sedition, what is insurrection, or what is espionage.
The Hong Kong government says Article 23 is necessary, but Amnesty International calls it a devastating moment for human rights. Human Rights Watch terms it a full-scale assault on rights, suppressing basic freedoms. Reporters Without Borders warns journalists should fear the law, calling it an extension of rules against press freedom defenders. The government can even punish acts committed anywhere in the world, not just in Hong Kong. Even here in Vancouver, those who fled the territory may face financial sanctions. This advocate for Hong Kong democracy says with so many people in Canada striving to maintain family or professional ties to Hong Kong, the law is chilling opposition here.
We have volunteers been up and say, I'm sorry, after the Article 23, I can't help you anymore. It's so sad, right? That you can't really, in a free country, to do whatever you want.
Now, we asked via email for comment from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, their Canadian Embassy, and even the Vancouver Consulate right here. We didn't hear back. Global Affairs Canada is expressing, quote, deep concern about Article 23. Pro-democracy activists like Tung plan to protest here at the consulate and at the Vancouver Art Gallery on Saturday, the day this new law goes into effect. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
And an update on that story, the Chinese Embassy in Canada has since responded to our request for comment, telling CBC, quote, we strongly deplore and firmly oppose individual countries and organizations slandering against the Safeguarding National Security Bill of Hong Kong. Well, Canada stands out from many other countries when it comes to happiness. The latest data from the World Happiness Survey finds younger generations are not as satisfied with their lives compared to older generations. The CBC's Yvette Brand looks at why.
This is 4-year-old Wyatt's happy place, but for many Canadians older than him, happiness seems to be declining.
So after COVID, people don't go out anymore, like as much as before, so I think that might be one of the reasons.
This year's happiness report shows this country has slipped from 13th place to 15th, and when it comes to those under 30, Canada is 58th. Far behind Nordic countries like Finland, which has been in first place for 7 years now.
So in Finland, Denmark, and the other Scandinavian countries, you'll find that wealth is way more evenly distributed. So more people benefit from the wealth that's being generated in these countries.
The rankings are based on assessments by individuals of their own lives.
Canada stands out in that our young seem to be doing worse than our elders by more than is true elsewhere.
Not a shock at this table of 20-somethings.
Finding places or like
even the simple things like groceries can add up so much, and then you feel this like weight of like you have to be able to make this amount to afford to live here, otherwise you're low income when you're not even low income.
There's moments where those thoughts, of course, come in, like things like the pandemic, not being able to see your friends.
Trying to buy my groceries and pay rent, and I can only work part-time because I'm in school so much.
Researchers hope that tracking happiness using hard science could inspire governments to adopt new approaches.
Then we can rethink a lot of things. What would life look like if we actually had well-being oriented policies for a generation or two? I think that's an unknown.
He hopes this research forces change, shifting government health and social policies to focus on more than economic growth.
Meeting friends makes us happy, having people over.
To help Canadians back to a happier place. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
An online petition to stop logging in Vancouver Stanley Park has generated 15,000 signatures in 1 month. The park board is undertaking a major project to remove as many as 160,000 looper moth-infested hemlock trees. It says it's targeting trees that pose the greatest risk of falling on people and infrastructures. But many are not happy with what's being done.
You would look up and you would see forest. Now on those same trails, you hear traffic noise, and you look up and you see the highway.
The park board says crews have so far only dealt with roughly 20% of the area that is set to be logged. It's only March, but northern BC is already putting in place a burn ban. Starting March 28th, Category 2 and 3 open burning will be prohibited. This affects the regions of Prince George, Stewart-Nichaco, Mackenzie, and Peace areas, as well as Fort Nelson Forest districts. Bans typically come into effect in late April or May, but officials are taking early precautions this year because of the persistent dry conditions with little rain. The bans include fireworks, sky lanterns, and burn barrels, but do not include small campfires. The bans will be in place until October. Well, the BC government is spending $30 million on more infrastructure for electric vehicles. The province is aiming to add 500 new public EV charging stations across BC. That's in addition to the existing 5,000 already in place province-wide. BC already has one of the largest public EV charging networks in Canada. The goal here is to have 10,000 stations province-wide by 2030. After a 4-year hiatus, the Vancouver International Auto Show is back. It's taking over the Vancouver Convention Centre until Sunday. We stopped by on day 1 of the show to check out the latest innovations in the automotive industry.
What are you most looking forward to today at the auto show?
Just trying on different cars. It's great to have everything in under one roof rather than going to different dealerships. I think that's very exciting, and then you get to try different stuff and all that things.
Just to look at the Cybertruck.
That's the only reason why you came to the car show?
I looked at some of the exotic cars too.
What kind of exotic cars are you interested in?
The McLarens. I'm not interested in buying them. I just like them.
Oh, we're just browsing, just looking cars. They're awesome.
What kind of cars do you like the best?
Oh, the supercars, Lamborghinis, Ferraris. They're amazing.
But yes, we're here to see the Cybertruck. It's so cool.
Well, it is officially spring, and while many are celebrating the blooming flowers and the longer days, the arrival of spring has a greater significance for some. Nowruz, or Navroz, known as the Persian New Year, is being celebrated by many today and tomorrow. Zara Premji is celebrating as well, and she shares some more about the significance of this special time.
Devotional recitations, fire jumping, and of course stocking up on tasty treats, all part and parcel when it comes to getting ready to celebrate Persian New Year.
Because of the part of the culture, it's many years ago, our grandma, grandfather, usually grandma, they make a sweet at home by hand to share with neighbors, share with the family and all grandchildren.
Nowruz in Farsi, Navroz in Ismaili Muslim tradition, and Nowruz for the Baha'i is celebrated at the time of the vernal equinox when night and day are equal length. And where there's Navroz or Nowruz, there's bound to be a half-sin table. It carries 7 specific items whose names start with the letter sin in Persian, all set out as symbols of prosperity, health, and happiness.
When we see the sun, when we see the flowers, it's kind of
natural for us to want to put our best step forward.
Celebrations, traditions, meals, and even clothes are different depending on who is taking part, but the meaning remains the same.
It's a very, very special moment for us because Nowruz, New Year's, and also the weather is going to be changed, spring start.
It's a good chance for us to reflect on our personal goals and set new intentions.
New start for the nature and also for the people too.
For me, a day after Nowruz, I feel the weather is nicer, the blossoms, everything just look more beautiful.
And this year in particular, the New Year coincides with Ramadan. A rare occurrence and a unique experience for those partaking in both.
Nowruz for me is kind of maybe like a physical, natural reset, but Ramadan is more of a spiritual reset. Fasting itself is a challenge, but it's rewarding too, and I think the reward is that much more profound with the anticipation of, I guess, the evening celebrations of Nowruz that I can participate in.
And whether you're celebrating or you want to acknowledge someone who is, it's a simple greeting that could go a long way.
این فارسی میشه سال نوتون مبارک باشه، نوروزتون پیروز باشه و آرزوی سال خوبی براتون داریم. It means we wish happiness and happy New Year's.
Happy Nowruz. In Farsi, we say Nowruz Mubarak.
Happy Nowruz to everyone, yes. Okay.
Zara Premji, CBC News, West Vancouver.
Well, still ahead, lots changed during the pandemic, including the ways wildlife have responded to the decline in human interaction. Our Darius Madavi will explain how exactly after the break. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Russian protest band Pussy Riot is in town touring their art exhibit, Velvet Terrorism. Host of On the Coast, Gloria Makarenko, sat down with one of the band's founding members to discuss Vladimir Putin's fifth successful election, as well as the war in Ukraine and global political movements.
Well, 12 years have passed since the feminist arts collective Pussy Riot staged their punk prayer protest against the impending re-election of Vladimir Putin in a Moscow church. Now, Pussy Riot's members were charged with hooliganism motivated by religious hatred. They were sentenced to 2 years in a remote penal colony. Now, the history of Pussy Riot's imprisonment and more political actions are documented in Velvet Terrorism, Pussy Riot's Russia. It's an exhibition opening this week at the Polygon Gallery on the North Shore. And we are so happy that joining us in studio right now is Masha Aliokina, original member of Pussy Riot and one of the curators of this exhibition. Masha, hello, welcome, and it's so nice to have you here.
Thank you. Hi.
This is interesting timing, too, isn't it? The fact that Putin was just re-elected again this week. When I talk about your, 12-year trajectory, what's changed for you over these 12 years?
Where we live is quite dark, for my opinion, because the recent rise up of ultra-right politicians and ultra-right movements is going on, and good people need to rise up and spread the message as loud as possible. Otherwise, the world will look different in 10 years. And with my country, we witnessed it quite clear. 12 years ago, that was another country. Definitely authoritarian. Definitely the elections were falsified. But there were no hundred thousands of dead bodies in our country and in Ukraine. And nobody kind of taught us how to live during the war. We definitely heard about the Second World War. We went to history lessons, but no one could imagine that it will happen again. No one could imagine that our country will be the main aggressor in Europe. So we try to do now what we can to support Ukraine, to stand with this brave country, and to show to people around the world what is this regime about.
Well, the pandemic changed the way people worked and lived. Turns out it did the same for animals, but maybe not in the way you might think. Though there is a prevailing idea that wildlife were running free during the pandemic, a new UBC study has called that into question. To break this all down, science specialist Darius Madavi joins us now. And Darius, what's the big message, the big takeaway of the study?
In 3 words, it would be animals are complicated. Just generally speaking, we should be wary of broad generalizations, and wildlife run free when people aren't around definitely falls into that category. So a team of researchers, led by experts right here at UBC, wanted to test that claim. And so they used data on land mammals collected around the world, and unsurprisingly, their findings were not so cut and dry.
Particularly species like carnivores, like wolves or wolverines, they tended to reduce their activity in an area when humans increased, and they dropped out entirely of some of the more, some of the busiest landscapes. Whereas some other animals, like some of the prey animals, herbivores like deer and moose and elk, some of them actually increased their activity in certain places where humans became more active again.
So why the difference? Well, one idea is that in many areas, people were actually out in natural spaces more, since it was one of the few places we could go. So if more humans around caused predators to be less active, prey animals may have been more comfortable being out more. And that same root cause, humans spending more time out in nature, likely explains another of the study's findings, that rural wildlife became less active, because they're not as familiar with humans, and urban wildlife became more active. Though even those that become somewhat more active shifted when they were out, becoming more nocturnal, potentially to avoid interacting with humans there too. So it's complicated all the way down, Tanya.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, you mentioned they use data from around the world. Where exactly did that data come from?
Oh, this might be the most exciting part of the study. All this data came from a massive network of trail cams, most of which are in North America and Europe, but there are also some spread across almost every continent. And the number and diversity of people contributing to that project continues to grow all the time, which gives us a treasure trove of information.
We were monitoring the animals before this happened, and it's quite rare for us to get to do experiments when we're studying these wide-ranging animals and their interactions with people. So we kind of thought of this as a bit of a pseudo experiment in the sense that the government policies led to these strong and quick changes in what people were doing on these landscapes.
This is a huge part of what makes this paper so interesting. The gold standard of ecological research is an experimental study, but that requires separating your subjects into groups so that you can compare them. And as you might imagine, it's hard to get approval to empty out half of Vancouver to compare what animals do with and without people. So the images and video from these trail cams before versus during lockdowns is probably the closest we will ever get to actually running an experiment like that.
Here's a live shot of Harbor Center, and rainy, cooler weather moved in today. We'll find out how long it'll feel until it feels like spring again with your long-range forecast next.
These chickens have something to say. But what exactly? Well, that's what Suresh Nithirajan wants to know. For the past year, he's been working with chickens trying to figure out their foul language.
Even among human beings, when we communicate, there is a lot of communication gaps. We tend to misinterpret what others say. So communication is a key for better understanding each other. What if we can understand the language of farm animals such as chickens so that we can improve their quality of life when they are here in the farm?
During a span of about 16 weeks, he put hundreds of chickens to the test, learning what their vocalizations and actions really mean.
Every day we collected a bunch of data. We stressed them with visual cues like opening an umbrella suddenly. We also played dog barking sound to stress them out via audio stress. We were trying to understand how different types of stresses play a role and how they communicate, how they express themselves.
Nithirajan says when faced with all of these trials, like the dog barking, the chickens had a lot to say. Not with words, but with things like pauses between their sounds, the pitch and tone, and the energy behind it.
sometimes a group of chickens talk among themselves, express their satisfaction, contentment, frustration, even if there is a delay in the availability of feed, or there is a change in the hygiene protocol or the lighting intensity, they can actually express that through the vocalizations.
After collecting the sounds, their chirps, clucks, and squawks get fed into an artificial intelligence program. The AI can highlight patterns and how often certain noises are made. And that helps Neethi Rajan decipher when and what chickens use certain sounds for.
So we look at these modulations of sound using algorithms based on the context. Then we collaborate with animal behavior scientists, ethologists, to create a spectrum in terms of understanding the cognition. What zone in terms of, is it positive, negative, or neutral emotion?
Neethi Rajan says he hopes that by deciphering chicken language and in turn their needs, he can help farmers and others in the industry improve animal welfare. Neethi Rajan says his research will be ongoing, and he'll continue to work with chickens and other farm animals, deciphering the code that is their speech until he's cracked it. Felicia Chandler, CBC News, Halifax.
Darius Madavi is here with our look at the forecast. Darius, it was sure waking up to a cold, harsh reality with that drizzle that just stuck around all morning.
Yeah, we did see some showers. I think many people felt them. They were light enough that hardly anything was showing up on the radar, so not anything too significant, and that's really going to be the story over the next few days. Tomorrow, pretty dry for the south coast. That really, those more major showers coming for mostly the South Island and the lower mainland, as well as maybe up the Sea to Sky, coming Friday, Saturday, maybe Sunday. But really tomorrow we're going to be fairly dry, mix of sun and cloud. You can see that here. Really just some very isolated scattered showers happening tomorrow across the south coast and Vancouver Island. So expect a more dry day. We'll probably see a little bit of sunshine, which should be a nice change. In terms of temperatures, they are going to stay roughly where they are, just hovering around seasonal, maybe a degree or two above or below, depending on where you are in the south. Meanwhile, we do have a ridge of high pressure building into the north. That means they'll be staying dry and they'll get some sunny weather, but also they will be somewhat cool as well. So we're going to see those temperatures trends continue right into the weekend. No big changes coming soon, just this cool, unsettled air mass going to stay over the province for the foreseeable future. For now, we are going to look at the conditions across the province, which are fairly calm. A little bit of sunshine across many regions, a little break in the clouds, but not a sign of anything clearing up, any long-term clearing up here in the south. But generally speaking, anywhere we do see showers here, it's just a chance, and where we do some, they should be pretty short-lived, so don't expect any really consistent rainfall or snowfall, except maybe some bigger accumulations on along the Rockies, and then a little bit for the South Coast mountains, as well as on Vancouver Island. Some of those peaks maybe getting a couple centimeters of snow, but generally speaking, it's going to be, even though freezing levels are coming down for places like the local mountains, it could be a mix of some rain and some snow. But generally speaking, if we take a look at our forecast, there is plenty of rain on the way, but there will be breaks for a little bit of sunshine, so don't despair just yet. Spring is not fully over already.
I hope not.
I guess spring being over would make it summer. Winter is ending, at least.
Okay,
at some point.
We'll go with that, and we will look forward to tomorrow, hopefully staying a little bit dry, at least here. Thank you so much, Darius.
Thanks, Tanya.
And that is your late news for this Wednesday, March 20th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online as well. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.